Adrift, the unbelievable story of José Salvador Alvarenga. Chapter 1. The journey begins. José Salvador Alvarenga's life had always been tied to the sea. For years, he worked as a fisherman in the small village of Costa Azul, Mexico. The ocean was his office, his source of survival. It was also his sanctuary, a place where he felt in control. But on that late November morning in 2012, Alvarenga's life would take an unimaginable turn. Eager for a good catch, he set out in his 24-foot fiberglass boat, planning for a quick 2-day shark fishing trip. With his usual partner unavailable, Alvarenga recruited an inexperienced young fisherman, 22-year-old Ezequiel Cordoba. Despite Cordoba's reservations about venturing far into the open Pacific, Alvarenga assured him they'd be back in no time. By noon, they were deep into the waters, reeling in a good haul. The horizon stretched wide and peaceful, but Alvarenga's gut sensed something different in the wind. A storm was coming. Yet, with a decent amount of fish in their nets, he decided it was time to head back. Before they could make their retreat, the skies darkened, and the ocean turned hostile. The boat pitched violently as the wind howled, waves rising as high as houses. Within minutes, the storm swallowed them whole. Chapter 2. Lost at Sea. The storm raged for hours, battering their small boat until the engine sputtered and died. Their radio was shorted by water, leaving them without communication. Alvarenga cursed under his breath. He'd seen bad weather before, but nothing like this. They were drifting aimlessly, helpless in the vastness of the Pacific. When the storm finally relented, they were far from shore, with no way to navigate back. The GPS was broken, the boat's engine silent. There was nothing but open ocean around them. For the first few days, Alvarenga and Cordoba held on to hope that they would be found. They rationed their meager supply of water and food, convinced rescue would come soon. But as days turned into weeks, the reality of their situation began to sink in. Without rain, they had no fresh water. They survived by catching fish, eating them raw, and drinking the blood for hydration. The sun was merciless, burning their skin, while the nights were freezing, leaving them shivering in the dark. Time began to blur. Days melted into one another, the endless blue stretching into infinity. Each morning they awoke to the same unforgiving ocean, no closer to salvation. Chapter 3. Cordoba's Decline. The strain of survival took its toll on Cordoba faster than it did on Alvarenga. The younger man's body weakened, and his spirit was broken by the relentless hunger and thirst. He refused to eat the raw fish that kept them alive, gagging at the sight of it. Alvarenga tried to force him, knowing that without food, Cordoba wouldn't survive. But the younger fisherman had already given up. One day, Cordoba looked at Alvarenga with hollow eyes, whispering, "I can't do it anymore. I don't want to die like this." Alvarenga didn't know how to respond. He had fought every day to keep them both alive, but Cordoba's mind had already succumbed to the ocean's unrelenting isolation. Weeks later, Cordoba's condition worsened. His body wasted away until, one morning, Alvarenga woke to find him still, cold, lifeless. Alvarenga was alone now. With trembling hands, he wrapped Cordoba's body and gave it to the ocean. As the sea claimed his companion, a wave of guilt and despair washed over him. Cordoba was gone, and now Alvarenga had only himself to keep alive. Chapter 4. Alone. The loneliness that followed was unbearable. The vast, indifferent ocean stretched endlessly in every direction. Days passed in silence, interrupted only by the occasional bird or splash of a fish. Alvarenga spoke to Cordoba sometimes, imagining conversations to stave off the madness creeping into his mind. But his body, weakened by months of starvation and dehydration, continued to fight. His survival instincts kicked in with fierce determination. He learned to catch birds, drinking their blood, for hydration when there was no rain. He ate whatever he could catch: small fish, turtles, even jellyfish. The pain of hunger never left him, gnawing at his insides, but Alvarenga refused to give up. He had spent his entire life battling the ocean. This, he told himself, was just another fight. Chapter 5. 438 Days. As weeks turned into months, and months into a full year, Alvarenga lost track of time. His body was skeletal, his skin burnt and leathery from the sun. His clothes had disintegrated to rags. He had drifted over 6,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean, farther than he could ever have imagined. Then, one morning, after 438 days adrift, Alvarenga spotted something, faint but unmistakable, a dark smudge on the horizon. His heart leapt in his chest. He squinted, praying that it wasn't another hallucination. The shape didn't disappear. It grew larger, clearer. Land. With every last bit of strength, Alvarenga paddled toward it, his arms weak but driven by the sheer force of survival. As the shape resolved into a small island, he cried out in disbelief. Finally, after over a year lost at sea, he had found land. Chapter 6. Rescue. Alvarenga washed ashore on Abon Atoll in the Marshall Islands, collapsing onto the soft, warm sand. He wept tears of relief, exhaustion, and disbelief. He had survived the impossible. Local islanders found him and immediately recognized the severity of his condition. They offered him food, water, and shelter. But more than anything, they offered him hope. After 438 days adrift, in one of the most remote regions of the world, Alvarenga had been found. Word of his miraculous survival spread quickly, and soon the world knew his story. José Salvador. Alvarenga had endured one of the longest survival ordeals in recorded history. Epilogue. The Man Who Beat the Ocean. Alvarenga's story of survival is one that defies the odds. After drifting over 6,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean, living on nothing but raw fish, birds, and rainwater, he became a symbol of the human will to survive. Doctors were stunned by his physical and mental resilience. He suffered from severe malnutrition, dehydration, and emotional trauma, but he had survived. Though many questioned how anyone could last so long at sea, Alvarenga's story has become a legend of human endurance, reminding the world of one simple truth. When everything seems lost, and the world is nothing but an endless horizon, the will to live can carry a man farther than he ever thought possible.